Caligula, whose real name was Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, was born in 12 AD into one of Rome's most powerful families. His father, Germanicus, was a famous and respected general, loved by the Roman people, and seen as a symbol of honor, courage, and traditional Roman values. From childhood, Caligula lived close to power, politics, military life, and constant danger. He grew up in army camps, surrounded by soldiers, learning early that authority was built on discipline and fear. His nickname, Caligula, meaning little boots, came from the miniature military sandals he wore as a child, showing how deeply his identity was connected to the army and power from a very young age. Despite this privileged background, his early life was deeply traumatic. His father died under suspicious circumstances when Caligula was still a child, possibly poisoned by political rivals. His mother and brothers were later arrested and accused of treason under Emperor Tiberius. They were sent into exile or prison, where most of them eventually died. Caligula learned early that in Roman politics, family ties and honor offered no protection. Survival depended on obedience, silence, and the ability to hide one's true thoughts. He was taken to live with Emperor Tiberius on the island of Capri, where he spent several years observing the emperor's paranoia, cruelty, and manipulation. On Capri, Caligula saw how power could be used to destroy enemies, how accusations could replace evidence, and how fear could control even the most powerful men. He learned to behave carefully, to flatter when necessary, and to suppress his emotions. This period shaped his understanding of authority and survival. In 37 AD, after Tiberius died, Caligula became emperor at the age of 24. The people welcomed him with excitement and hope. They remembered his father with affection and believed that the son would continue his legacy. Senators, soldiers, and common citizens celebrated his rise to power. In his early months, Caligula worked hard to build goodwill. He released political prisoners, restored civil rights, gave financial gifts to the army and the poor, reduced taxes, and organized large public games and festivals. He showed respect to the Senate and appeared interested in fair governance. Rome believed it had finally found a ruler who would bring stability and dignity back to the empire. Writers of the time described this period as joyful and hopeful. However, about 6 months into his reign, Caligula became seriously ill. He nearly died, and for several days the entire empire waited anxiously for news of his condition. When he recovered, many people noticed a dramatic change in his behavior. Ancient historians wrote that he became cruel, arrogant, suspicious, and unstable. He began to believe that he was superior to all others and started referring to himself as divine. He demanded excessive praise and obedience. Some scholars believe his illness may have caused brain damage or triggered mental disorders, while others think it simply removed the restraints he had previously imposed on himself. Whatever the cause, after his recovery, Caligula stopped respecting laws, traditions, and social limits. He began ruling through fear rather than cooperation. Power became not a responsibility, but a personal possession to be used for pleasure, revenge, and control. After his transformation, Caligula turned torture and execution into public performances. He believed that fear worked best when it was visible and memorable. He wanted people not only to obey him, but to constantly think about what he could do to them. He organized luxurious banquets for senators, generals, and nobles. These events were filled with expensive food, wine, music, and entertainment. While guests were eating and pretending to enjoy themselves, prisoners would suddenly be brought in. Some were accused of treason, others of minor offenses, and some had done nothing at all. In front of everyone, these prisoners were beaten, strangled, stabbed, or dismembered. Caligula watched calmly while eating, sometimes laughing or making cruel jokes. He treated suffering as a form of entertainment. The guests were trapped. Leaving was forbidden. Showing sympathy was dangerous. Showing enjoyment was also risky. They had to maintain a neutral expression while witnessing horrific deaths. This created constant psychological pressure and reinforced Caligula's dominance. He also used wild animals in private chambers. Prisoners were locked in small rooms with lions, bears, or specially trained dogs. With no space to escape, they were slowly hunted and torn apart. Caligula observed from behind barriers or windows, commenting on the animals' behavior. He treated these scenes like private shows. This method increased fear because it removed any sense of dignity or fairness. Victims knew they would die in terror and isolation. Senators, who were traditionally protected by law, were no longer safe. Caligula arrested them without trials. He accused them of disrespect, conspiracy, or insufficient loyalty. Many were dragged from their homes at night. Some were seized in public places. They were stripped of their clothing, beaten, humiliated, and executed in front of their colleagues. This destroyed centuries of Roman tradition that respected senatorial dignity. It showed that social rank no longer mattered. Sometimes Caligula went further and targeted entire families. Wives, daughters, sons, and relatives of accused men were arrested. They were tortured first while the accused were forced to watch. Parents watched their children beaten, burned, or mutilated. Husbands watched their wives abused. This psychological torture was designed to break people completely before killing them. Caligula also used symbolic punishments. People accused of speaking against him had their tongues cut out. Those accused of writing against him had their hands removed. These punishments sent clear messages that disobedience would be erased. Victims were sometimes displayed in public afterward as living warnings. Sexual humiliation became one of Caligula's most powerful weapons. He understood that shame could be more destructive than physical pain. Noble women were assaulted, paraded naked, or violated in public. Husbands and fathers were sometimes forced to watch. Men were sexually abused to destroy their honor and masculinity. Prisoners were forced into mock marriages or degrading performances before being assaulted and killed. These acts created lifelong shame for families and ensured that stories of fear spread rapidly through society. Executions became increasingly cruel and elaborate. Some prisoners were slowly dismembered over many hours. Fingers, toes, hands, and feet were removed one by one. Wounds were sometimes sealed to prevent quick death, prolonging suffering. Others were placed in cages and starved to death in public view. Crowds watched as their bodies wasted away. Some were buried alive in sealed chambers, left to suffocate or die of thirst in darkness. Parents were forced to watch their children tortured and killed before being executed themselves. These methods were chosen not for justice, but for emotional impact. Torture became routine and systematic. It was part of daily life at the palace. Caligula also claimed to be a living god. He ordered people to worship him. He placed his statues in temples, ordered sacrifices in his name, and dressed as Jupiter, Apollo, or Neptune. He referred to other gods as equals or subordinates. Executions were sometimes presented as religious ceremonies, with victims treated as offerings to him. Incense, priests, and rituals were used to give killings a sacred appearance. Traditional Roman religion, which had been based on mutual respect between gods and humans, collapsed. It was replaced by fear-based worship. People built shrines in their homes and made daily offerings, not out of faith, but out of terror. Ancient historians such as Suetonius and Cassius Dio recorded these events. They wrote decades later and may have exaggerated some details, but their accounts agree on key points. Property records, inscriptions, and official documents confirm widespread executions and confiscations. Coins and monuments show Caligula's divine claims. Letters from contemporaries reveal widespread fear. By 41 AD, Rome lived in constant anxiety. Political life had almost stopped. Senators avoided meetings. Families avoided public displays of affection. People carefully measured every word and expression. Everyone expected arrest or death at any moment. Even Caligula's own guards feared him. He mocked and humiliated them, questioned their loyalty, and forced them to participate in cruelty. A group of Praetorian officers eventually decided he had to die. Led by Cassius Chaerea and others, they believed that killing Caligula was the only way to save Rome from complete collapse. On January 24, 41 AD, during a palace festival, they attacked him in a narrow corridor. They stabbed him repeatedly until he died in his own blood. His wife Caesonia and their infant daughter were also killed to prevent any future claim to power. When the news spread, people felt shock, relief, and joy. Crowds destroyed his statues and erased his name from monuments. The Senate condemned his memory. His uncle Claudius was declared emperor. Although Claudius ruled more responsibly, the system of absolute power remained. Another tyrant could always rise. One famous case from Caligula's reign was that of Livia Orstella and her husband Piso. Piso was falsely accused of treason. He was arrested, tortured, and chained in the palace. Livia was summoned and forced to sit beside Caligula at a banquet. She had to smile, serve him, and pretend to enjoy his company while her beaten husband watched helplessly. Later, she was handed over to soldiers and abused. Piso was then brutally executed, and Livia was killed soon after. Their story became a symbol of Caligula's cruelty and of how innocent people could be destroyed for entertainment. Caligula's reign shows how unlimited power can destroy humanity. It demonstrates how fear can replace law, how institutions can collapse, and how cruelty can become normal when leaders face no accountability. Torture became theater. Fear became government. Suffering became policy. His rule remains a warning that civilization is fragile. Rights and protections exist only as long as people defend them. When one person gains unchecked authority, even advanced societies can fall into terror. Caligula's story is not only about one man's madness, but about how systems that concentrate power without limits can turn personal cruelty into state policy and transform entire societies into instruments of fear.